On All Hallows Eve, when the moon is agleam, the gays dissect films on a pod called Let's Scream.
Films with werewolves and demons, zombies and witches. Spooky season is here, so get ready, bitches.
Who will survive? Which divas go down when a killer named Michael is let loose on the town?
It's finally October, and spooky's the theme. Our one question for you is, Are you ready to scream?
Oh, God.
Oh, you good?
Girls, sorry about that. I don't know what was in my throat.
Come on, girl, let's scream.
I am a god.
No, please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel. This is the part where you run.
Come on, scream.
Hello, and welcome to Let's Scream, a podcast where we dive into our favorite horror movies. I'm Parker.
And I'm Stevie.
And today we're looking at 2010's Paranormal Activity 2, directed by Todd Williams.
Join us as we journey to Dan and Christy's house and learn a little bit more about Toby.
Toby! Are you ready to scream, girl?
Come on, girl. Let's scream.
Okay, so we are continuing spooky season. We wanted to do a movie that had a ghost.
A ghost.
A movie that had some paranormal activity up in it. And we're doing the sequel. And I will say, right out the gate, I think this is like my favorite found footage horror movie. Wow. Or at least one of them. It's up there, for sure. And I love found footage. And I think that this is one of the rare sequels that surpasses the original. I think this one's better than number one, which I said in our review for the original movie.
I agree probably with both of those statements. Not probably. I definitely agree with both of them. Like, I think this is a great sequel. I think it's better than the first one. And it's probably one of my favorite found footage films. But it has the problem I have with most found footage films, which I think is pacing issues. And I always think they go on a little too long.
Which...
Listen,
that's
I
your
am,
thing.
that's my, I am in that generation of like, oh my God, how fucking long is a movie? But if it's long and there's a narrative and it makes sense for it to be long, I love it. But
you love Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and I think that's the longest movie we've covered,
like
right?
that one I
That's
think
a really
is so
long
interesting.
movie.
I do think it's long. I mean, I did give that complaint. I'm like, it's still a little long, but it's an old movie. And like, I still love watching that movie. It's one of my favorites. And there's also like really long movies I love watching, like the Lord of the Rings movies, like non-horror movies.
Oh yeah, I forgot that you're a big Lord of the Rings fan.
I grew up with that.
That always surprises
and
me.
honestly, one of my gay awakenings. It's why I'm like
Orlando Bloom.
just all of them.
All
with
of
like long hair and
Long
facial
hair.
I just was like, that's for me.
Oh well, look at Keaton.
That's long hair.
Look at Keaton.
And facial hair.
Bearded long hair. Yeah.
And I'm like, that's for me.
You got what you wanted. You got what you wanted.
That was one of mine. My other one was Survivor.
Oh
all
yeah,
the boys running around
all
in their
the boys
underwears.
in Survivor.
In their
yeah.
undies. But like I can do a long movie, but like these movies, the thing with like theatrical releases is they have to have a time minimum. And so sometimes with found footage, it's like, well, you can kind of see where they're just
Trying to fill the time.
And so
yeah, I get that.
So I think this one's not as bad. But
you're just not a found footage girl.
But I'm also
That's
just
what I'm learning
not
about
a found
you.
footage. I'm not. I'm really not. And they're either very disturbing or they're just like, okay, kind of boring.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say. They're like, oh, nothing really happens. Da-da-da-da-da. Which I get. I think that's a fair critique. But with found footage, I'm able to just kind of go into it with the point of view of like, oh, this is found footage. So it's not going to tell like a linear narrative that it has like a well-paced story.
And I like...
It's a collection of clips, basically.
I get that, but yeah, like I just can't.
It's just not for you.
I don't do that, and I can't look at it that way, I guess. Yeah.
Girl, I think that's totally fair. But I will say, Paranormal Activity 2 does, I think, have a great storyline, and I think that the characters are really fun in this one. Because we're coming off of Paranormal Activity 1, which when you and I reviewed that movie, first of all... We couldn't get over their house. if you remember. Their fucking early 2000s ass
Oh my
house.
god, yes.
I swear that's like all we talked about when we reviewed that first movie. But yeah, that first movie, you've got Katie and Mika. Mika's an asshole. We don't give a fuck about Mika.
Yeah.
Poor Katie, she's like trying to hold it together the whole time.
Yeah.
But the story itself is harder for me to give a shit about because I just can't stand Mika. But I really like the family in this movie. I think they're all really likable characters.
Yeah.
Even the dad, who is kind of, again, like, oh, I don't believe you, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Even him, at the end of the day, is still way more likable than Mika.
Yeah.
And this house is way better.
Well, because he's a dad, and he's also, like, it's not his first marriage. So, you know, he's a little bit more mature.
Yeah, he's way more mature than Mika was, yeah.
So.
And he's funny. It's a very funny family. Like, I find them really relatable and just good characters, for sure.
Yeah. And I will also say just, but as a sequel, I think this one, it explains a lot from the first film, and I think it does a really great job with that. Because sometimes films will try to do that in the sequels, and it's like, oh, they did not plan this.
Yeah,
but this
they,
feels
like,
like they really thought
did.
about it, and
they added more to the lore.
and they added more to the lore. They still expanded on it so much still. So that's why I also think it did great as a sequel.
Yeah.
And I think it also just took the concept and did a much better job with it, honestly. And all it took was a few more camera angles.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say. More characters for sure, and
more
more
characters
camera
and more
angles.
cameras. It made it just way more
And it
interesting.
just kind of made it cuntier. Yeah, I think that's all I want to give up front for Paranormal Activity 2. I really enjoy it. Again, probably my favorite found footage movie. I couldn't recommend it more.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Go watch the first one, then go watch this one because the story like weaves in and out. It's really fun that way.
I think it's a fun one too.
It's just fun.
There were moments that I was laughing. This one's very funny.
Yeah. So at this point, we are going to get into spoiler talk for Paranormal Activity 2. So if you've never seen it, don't want to be spoiled, pause this podcast and go watch that movie and then come back and get into the plot with us. Are you ready to scream, girl?
Come on, girl.
Let's scream. Okay, so Paranormal Activity 2. It starts just like the first one did. We get a title card that says Paramount Pictures would like to thank the families of the deceased and the Carlsbad Police Department.
We're gonna exploit these people.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, like, if you think about it, it's like, wait, are they exploiting these people?
It is, yeah.
If they were real, they're not.
Fuck the Carlsbad Police Department. That's
Yeah.
what I say. But Allie is our first character we meet. She's the teen daughter of this family. She's really funny, great character, love her. She is recording as her baby brother, Hunter, is coming home from the hospital. He was just born. We meet her stepmom, Christy. We meet her dad, Dan. And we meet their nanny, Martine.
Who is my diva of this film?
She's great, yeah. I love
Because
Martine.
we'll get into Martine later, but like she knew shit was going
She
down
knew.
right away. She's
She
like,
knew.
something's off.
Yeah, she's
Something's not right.
the best kind of character to have around when you've got Toby around, for sure.
She
clocked Toby.
She's my diva
She
of this
like
film.
she like sniffed the air and she was like, "Oh, bitch, Toby's
Evil.
here."
She was like, oh, I smell some evil in here.
Yeah. And we also meet their German Shepherd, Miss Abby.
Oh, I love this Abby.
She's so cute, such a cute dog. We get a tour of their very nice house. Now, Stevie, how would you compare this house to Katie and Mika's house?
Well, I kind of blocked Katie and Mika's house out of my head, but
I remember there was a lot of brown.
I remember the bedroom was awful. I remember the living room. The couch was like, oh, yep, that's a 2000s couch.
I remember their leopard print rug.
I don't remember that.
Oh, how
blocked
could you?
that out.
How could you forget? But this house is gorgeous.
This
Their
one's
house is so nice and
they have a
modern.
pool. They have this big open like kitchen and living room.
Yeah.
And then there's like the stairs that lead up to like a balcony hallway
Oh, it's so cute.
to like all the bedrooms upstairs. And it's just like, it's a really beautiful house.
So, like, Dan's giving a tour of their beautiful house. He goes into Allie's room and he films her. But I love this detail because she says, "Oh, what's up, brother from another mother?" Which, because they're filming this to be able to show Hunter when he's older.
Yes.
And so, without even, like, establishing it, like, oh, she is the stepsister of Hunter.
Yeah.
It just kind of subtly, it's very natural feeling.
Well,
And it
half
makes
sister,
this,
not stepsister.
half sister, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's the half sister. And I think that they established that very naturally and it makes it feel so realistic.
Yeah.
And I just feel like maybe later Paranormal Activities, if I remember correctly, don't do such a seamless job of establishing the character dynamics. So, but we'll save that for a later review.
I think 3's good.
Yeah, I like 1, 2, 3,
Three.
and the marked ones.
In the marked ones.
And
I haven't seen,
I don't like
I haven't
anything
seen anything
else.
past 3.
So Martine, our diva, she's holding the baby and she mainly speaks Spanish.
diva.
She mainly speaks Spanish. She says it's un bebé muy especial. Very special baby.
A very special baby.
Which I think is maybe foreshadowing. Then I was shook, Stevie, because I forgot that this whole thing was in here. The doorbell rings. It's Katie!
It's Katie! And she's just like normal.
Yeah, she's like, hey guys.
It's like, oh my god!
I literally was like, bad bitch alert, because I forgot that she was in this movie, like, at all.
Yeah.
Like, I hadn't seen it in a while.
Because it's the first gag dish. You're like, what? Because I don't. They
second.
never marketed this as like a prequel.
Continue. Yeah, like, I never would have thought Katie was going to be in here. But as you learn, she's Christy's sister.
Because she's like, where's my nephew?
Yes. So,
And
if you remember correctly, in the first movie, Katie told that one, was he like a exorcist guy or... No, he was just a psychic. That's what it was. She told this psychic guy that when she was little, her and her younger sister, Christy, ding, 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 were haunted, right? So that's where this all comes into play. So I think this movie does such a good job of like just very naturally giving you the story.
So it's like if you had like...
there's no
So
expository
if you had seen
dialogue.
the first one and remembered that, the name, Christy, you would have been able to catch it right away. Like,
There's no clunky expository dialogue. It's just like very well presented.
Yes.
It feels realistic.
yeah.
And Katie is coming by to meet the new baby. So they do like a little cookout by the pool. And we're also introduced to Allie's boyfriend named Brad, who has like that middle part, shaggy hair, like 2010s haircut that everybody had.
Yeah.
And Katie introduces herself to him as Allie's evil step aunt. And she said, it's funny because she
Which
goes...
is foreshadowing.
It's foreshadowing. No, because literally what she says next is so funny because she goes, but I'm not really evil though. But I can be though, which is my point. Like she's kind of intimidating him, like, you know, be nice to my niece.
Yeah.
But it is definitely some foreshadowing because we know that Katie can be a little evil.
Oh, a little
Under
bit.
a certain influence, let's say. Then they ask her where Mika is. And she says, he's not really feeling up to hanging out today. And I think this is really clever because, without giving spoilers away for later, it makes you think, oh, is this after the first movie? Like, has Mika died at this point in the timeline? Like, is this right after she killed him? Yeah. And then it cuts to a few months later, and we see that their house has been completely broken into, and everything is ransacked. Things are broken. Christy says the only thing that she can find missing, however, is a necklace that Katie gave her. And they also noticed that Hunter's room was completely untouched, which is very interesting. So, this is the perfect setup for, okay, Dan's gonna go and install security cameras.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is the golden ticket for this Paranormal Activity, for why it's so successful, is now we have the security cameras. And it gives us so many more angles, so much to look at. So there's 6 cameras. There's one by the front door. There's one by the pool. There's one in the kitchen. There's one in the living room that overlooks the kitchen. There's one in the entryway and like kind of stairs area. And then there's one in Hunter's room. Yep. And so like in the first movie, every time that it would cut to Katie and Mika's bedroom at night, you'd be like, oh, shit's about to go down.
Yeah.
And it would like make you tense. in this movie, it's every time it cycles through those 6 cameras, you're like shit's gonna go down.
Because you never know when something's gonna pop up.
Every time it cuts to the security footage, my butthole clenched.
Yeah.
Clenched, bitch.
You'll also sometimes get focused on one because it'll stay on one sometimes a really long time. So like, oh, something's gonna happen here, something's gonna happen here, nothing will happen, and then it'll switch, and then like
to the other one, and then there's some spooky shit.
And like something will just all of a sudden happen.
Yeah.
It does a good job. This one does a really good job.
It's perfect, yeah. So that night, we get our first kind of cycle through of all those camera angles.
Mm-hmm.
That first morning, Dan finds that they have like a little ladybug pool cleaner machine thing, and it's gotten out of the pool by itself. So he just throws it back in, whatever, doesn't think anything of it. Then we also see Abby the dog scratching at the basement door, setting up that the basement seems to be where some shit is probably going to go down. Allie sees Martine kind of like muttering like a little prayer to herself. And she asks Martine what she was doing. And Martine says that she feels a negative presence in the house.
Yeah.
She was trying to bring in the positive energy and expel the bad energy. So again, Martine
Diva.
She is clocking Toby right away.
Oh, she knows shit is not right.
Mm-hmm. And we see Dan and Christy playing with Hunter. And in the other room, we hear Allie let out a horrific scream. And they run in. And it was a turd in the toilet she was screaming at. It was like a clogged toilet. And it reminded me of that meme where it's the lady being like, which one of you forgot to flush the toilet after you had a shit? Disgusting.
Why does somebody not know how to flush a toilet after they've had a shit? What me? Well, it was fucking one of yous. Disgusting.
And we found out later it was the younger sister.
It was the younger one.
She pooped. Yeah.
Yep.
It was her.
She did it blood.
Yeah, this was a great fake out. And Allie's like, it was Martine. And like, it was Martine. And the dad's like, it was you. Like, own up to it. That's your shit. It was really funny. And Katie comes by to stay with them for the weekend. And guess who's here too, bitch? Mika, bitch!
Mika! I will say, as big of an asshole Mika is, I forgot how cute he is.
He's a cutie, yeah. No, I said that he was such an asshole in the first movie. Why am I so excited to see him? But I am. I'm like,
she's like, oh yeah, wait, Mika's alive!
I know, yeah. So now we know this is taking place before the events of the first movie.
Yep.
So that's really when you're like, oh, this is a prequel.
Yep.
Also, Mika is commenting on how nice Dan's camera is. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of him being like, oh, I want to get a camera.
Yeah.
Which is like the whole inception of the first movie.
Yep.
Christy shares with Katie that ever since the break-in, she's felt like there are people still here. And she says, kind of like when we were little. And Katie's like, what do you mean? And Christy just goes, never mind. We see Christy alone with Hunter in his nursery. And when she goes to the bathroom, that little, like, parasail thing, is that what it's called? A parasail? Little...
No, I think it's just called a carousel.
Carousel?
It's just called a carousel.
Like...
Or a mobile.
Mobile, yeah. It's a baby toy thing. You know what
I'm talking
about.
Mobile, yeah.
It starts spinning by itself. That night, Hunter is standing up in his crib and he's staring at an unseen presence. It's Toby. Shh. It's fucking Toby.
Yep, he's like...
Dan starts having to put the cleaner back into the pool every morning. And that becomes like a whole running gag. Like every single morning, that pool cleaner has somehow got out of the pool. We see Martine and Allie. They have a cute relationship. She teaches Allie Spanish, and she gives her relationship advice. She's like, this boy better be nice to you. Yeah. And I really like Martine again. Like, she's just like very relatable. Diva. We love her. But that night, Martine gets sketched out by a bad vibe. And she notices the pool lights come on by themselves. Then a big jump scare as she hears a thud coming from Hunter's room, and she goes up to find him crying. So she gets some sage.
Yep.
And she starts saging the house. And Dad comes home and immediately gets super shitty with her. And the next day, he has literally fired her. And, like, sends her home.
Bad move.
Because she was, like, a live-in nanny. Like, so, like, he literally made her, like, pack her bags and fucking leave. And he just said, like, I have a no-tolerance policy for witchy shit, basically. And I'm like, what the fuck, Dan?
She's clearly a Catholic woman.
Yeah. And Allie is, like, shitty with him, too, because she was close with Martine. And it just was like, what the fuck? I don't know. It's kind of it's strike one for Dan.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's not as bad as Mika, but he does do some shit that pisses me off.
You just got rid of the diva.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, now you've sealed your fate.
Exactly.
Because she was going to save y'all.
Well, and I talked about how in Paranormal Activity 1, in our review for that, I feel like a lot of the themes in this series is, like, not believing women. Like, I feel like there is kind of a feminist theme here. Because it's always women trying to get the men to believe their stories. And it feels almost like very Me Too vibes a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of continuing that theme here because he's immediately dismissive of her and sends her home.
Yep.
Hunter keeps fixating on an invisible presence, Toby, in his closet, which sketches out Christy. And that night, she goes to check on him when he's crying, and the door swings open behind her. And she's standing by the window looking out at it. And suddenly there's a huge thud, which scared the shit out of me. The next morning, we see, though, that it was a bird that smashed into the window and died. Then, one night, Christy is awoken by a pot that falls off their drying rack above the kitchen island.
This one's good because you just see it swinging behind her. See, this one you just know, you're like, it's going to happen.
And then she puts it back up and she turns back around and it falls right the fuck back off.
He was like, Toby went, no!
Yeah.
Like, bitch!
I don't want it there.
I don't want it there.
Toby's a diva. Toby is a diva. So Mika and Katie come back to visit again for a pool party. And Dan is bitching to Mika about how Christy is being so dramatic, assuming that they have a ghost after the pots were falling. And the boys make comments about the girls, doing seances when they were little. And like, they seem to have a weird childhood. And Katie is like, I don't want to talk about that stuff anymore. I just don't talk about that stuff anymore. Christy insists that they check the cameras and they see the pool cleaner rise out of the pool by itself, which definitely spooks all of them, even Dan. And Allie confides to Dan that she doesn't think that a paranormal presence has to necessarily be a bad thing. And she says, well, what if it's Mom? And again, very natural dialogue.
Yeah.
Now we know that the mom died, she passed away, and that's why he remarried Christy, and that's why Allie is very quick to believe that there might be a supernatural presence. Like, it could be, the spirit of her mom.
Spoiler, it's not. It's Toby.
It's Toby.
It's Toby.
We've been knew that it's Toby.
Y'all, it's Toby.
We'll let Allie have her delusional and, be all cute and think that. So that night, the dog is in Hunter's room growling and barking at seemingly nothing. It's Toby. This whole podcast is gonna be it's Toby. Dan pranks the girls by showing them how the pool cleaner can bust out of the pool if the setting is set on too high. So it kind of debunks that whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, he basically is like, yeah, I think I just had the setting on too high. So they're like, okay, that makes sense. But Christy is like, I still feel like you don't believe me. I still think that there is a ghost.
Yeah.
And so, like, to make her feel better, Dan decides to go on a date with her, and they ask Allie to stay and watch the baby alone. But her boyfriend, Brad, comes by with a Ouija board. Because if it's one thing Paranormal Activity loves to do, it's give us a Ouija board moment. They play with it. This is such a good scene.
Yeah.
It's very funny. Because Allie asks it, what do you want? And it starts to spell out pussy. And you realize, like, yeah, Brad is messing with it. And then it starts moving, and she's laughing, and she thinks that he's still moving it. But he's like, I'm not moving it.
No, and it's spelling out Hunter.
But they don't realize that. Mm-hmm. Very spooky. Later that night, this scene really scares me. Allie is sleeping on the couch. and all of a sudden the TV cuts to static, and then this like shadow envelops her.
Yeah.
And she wakes up like, and the TV goes back to normal, and the shadow disappears, but just like she knows something is fucked. And she gets up and she finds the front door wide open. And she goes and closes it. And then it slams open again. So she goes outside to see if it was Brad messing with her. But the door slams shut.
And she gets locked out.
It's Locktober, baby. She is locked out.
She is locked.
Toby is celebrating a Locktober, bitch.
We're locked up in this house.
Mm-hmm. And upstairs, we hear heavy footsteps approach the baby's room. And we see Hunter get pulled to the end of his crib by an invisible entity. It's Toby.
It's Toby. Hey, spoiler. It's Toby.
Then it cuts to the dog getting spooked really quick. And then it cuts back and Hunter is floating on the edge of the crib. And it's funny, but this effect I thought looked amazing.
Yeah.
Like, how the fuck did they do that?
That
it was
baby.
really cool. Yeah. That baby was just like floating there perfectly. I wonder if it was like a animatronic baby or a puppet or something. I don't know. They did a great job. And then we see Hunter follow Toby down to the basement door. And he stands in front of the open basement door. But then it cuts to a few minutes later. I think it was 6 minutes later, bitch. Mm-hmm. And Hunter is just climbing back up the stairs. So we never see what happened in the basement. But that's another thing I love about this movie is that it will have those jumps where you just let your imagination fill in what happened. And it's spooky as hell.
Yeah.
Like there's something that happens later with Christy where it cuts to a few minutes later. And it just gives me chills because I love when movies do that. Like Blair Witch did that last week, or it didn't show us the Blair Witch. But sometimes not showing is way scarier than showing us.
Yeah.
Because your imagination will just go wild. And then when Christy and Dan come home, they find Hunter crying in his crib, and they don't know where Allie is. And she comes in from outside, and she's crying, and she's explains what happened.
Out.
Yeah, freaked the fuck out. But Dan doesn't believe her.
Yeah, he thinks she was like effing around.
Yeah. And so the next day, she's shitty with him. She gives him the silent treatment because she's trying to get him to understand, like, no, some shit's going down. So Allie goes out, and she's hanging out with her boyfriend, and she's researching paranormal activities. And she's explaining to him the difference between ghosts and demons, which, if you've seen the first movie, you know that it's like ghosts haunt houses, not people. But demons haunt people. And also, ghosts are spirits of humans that have passed away. But demons are just like fucked up, evil entity things. Yeah. They're like creatures. And she shows him something that she found online that says, if a human makes a bargain with a demon in exchange for money or power, they must forfeit their firstborn male son. If the debt is not followed, the demon will hunt their bloodline until the soul is collected. So this is the lore. Like, this is when the series is finally telling us why Toby is doing what he's doing. It's our first little insight to his motivation. Yep. So Allie shows Dan the footage of the door slamming on itself, and he literally goes, it's just the wind. It's like, dude, what?
And the wind locked the door.
And the wind locked the door, apparently. Locktober, I guess. So that night, Allie hears thudding, and she goes downstairs, and Hunter's little toy car starts operating on its own. So she shows this footage to Christy the next day. And Christy starts to kind of open up about her childhood to her. She's like, all I remember is just feeling scared all the time. And that's kind of like the only little bits and pieces we get of that so far. But then she goes and she hangs out with Katie. And Christy brings up their spooky childhood again. And Katie does not want to talk about it, which we know about Katie from the first movie. Yeah. She says, ignore, honey. She says, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
I do not want to talk about this.
Yeah.
And she's like, Christy, you know what happens when you talk about it. It makes it worse. And what I remember from our childhood is that you had all these panic attacks. And there was all these weird people visiting the house. And I just think you should ignore it, or you might end up like Mom. what happened to their mom? That's all. And then again, that's all you get. Just like a little bits and pieces.
Yeah.
We will meet their mom in the third movie, but that's another podcast episode.
Yeah.
Later, we see Christy alone in the kitchen. And this is the best jump scare of the movie because suddenly all of the kitchen cabinets just fly open and causes her to scream.
This is my favorite scene.
It's great.
No, it's not my favorite, but this one's a great one.
I think it's the best jump scare because the whole first movie and the first half of this movie, it's just like little things happening on the screen, like one corner of the screen that's spooky.
Yeah.
But this is just the whole boom,
She's
every
just
corner of the
sitting there.
screen. She freaks out and she says, "Leave me alone." She starts crying. But I like that she pulls herself together and she starts cleaning it back up. And I find Christy a very resilient character in this movie. And I appreciate that because I feel like Katie doesn't ever want to fight back in the first movie. She's just well, I'm possessed now. Whatever.
Yeah.
I'll just deal with it. Kinda. So I appreciate, again, these characters in this second movie I think are way more relatable.
Yes.
And Allie notices her crying upstairs in the bathroom, and she tries to get her to talk about it, but Christy says, "I can't. Aunt Katie said if we talk about it, it gets worse." And she leaves and storms out. So Allie is talking to Brad on the phone, and she theorizes that Katie and Christy's mom, who we'll meet in the third movie, might have made a deal with a demon. She has researched the family tree, and apparently Hunter is the first male heir to the bloodline in decades. That night, we see the basement door open by itself. And the dog runs downstairs and starts barking by the basement door very aggressively. And we hear a thud, and then we hear some whimpering. Not the dog!
Dog down.
This was really
Doggy
sad.
down.
I mean, it's not as bad as Ginger Snaps with all those dead dogs, but it's never fun to see a dog get hurt. And we don't see anything; it's all off screen. But Dan and Allie go downstairs. They find Abby's hurt, and so they rush to take the dog to the emergency vet clinic, I guess. And so Christy's alone with the baby. And she gets snatched.
This is so funny. She gets dragged down the stairs.
Why
She's
is it so slapsticky? Yeah.
It's it's
That's
exactly what I was gonna say.
She's no.
and then she gets snatched into the basement.
The basement, yep. And then we see a few minutes later, she walks out in a catatonic state.
Uh-oh.
Just like Katie did in the first movie.
So we got it.
Yep. So the next morning, Dan tells Allie that Christy's sick. She won't get out of bed. And he asks Allie to stay and watch Hunter while he goes and gets the dog from the vet. Allie discovers scratches on the inside of the basement doors, and weird runes carved into it.
Yeah.
And she goes up and she sees Christy laying in the chair in Hunter's room, and she has a big Toby bite mark on her thigh.
We didn't really acknowledge. That means that Abby lived.
Woo! Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
the dog's fine. The dog's
Dog
fine.
lived.
Hell yeah. And so she turns back into the room, and Christy has disappeared from the chair. And so she goes in and she's goes to check on Hunter. And then we see Christy appear behind her.
Yeah.
And then it just cuts to minutes later, and Allie's crying to her dad on the phone, Dad, you need to come here. Christy's whacked out. And this is the moment I was talking about earlier, where it's God, I wonder what the fuck Christy did to Allie upstairs. And we'll never know, but the implication is not good.
Yeah.
Ugh. And Allie goes to check the footage, and she sees Christy get snatched down the stairs. You know that.
And it's one of those you could add the cartoony sound effect.
Yeah.
Boing, 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 boing,
boing, boing. And she shows Dan the footage, and he decides to finally believe her. So guess who he calls? Miss Martine, bitch.
Adiva! And she know what to do.
He should have called her the first motherfucking night, bitch. Because she comes in, she knows exactly what to do. She starts making a little potion. She's got the sage. She's got all the good vibes. And she's got a crucifix she gives him. And she says there's only one way to get rid of this demon.
You gotta pass it on to someone else.
And it has to be a blood relative. So he kind of implies like, oh, we'll just expel the demon onto Katie. And Allie's like, no, we can't do that. Like, that's fucked up. That's Christy's sister. And then he goes up to check on Christy, who's laying catatonic in bed. And I watched this with Travis, and he was really funny. And he was like, she looks baked. She literally does. She looks stoned out of her mind.
She took an edible.
Yeah.
That's actually what happened.
When the edible hits. And he approaches her with that crucifix that Martine gave him. And Christy goes demon on him. And she's like, bleh. And then the power goes out.
Yes, that's right.
And then we get like, this is like probably the climax of the movie, I would say. It's just like shit is hitting the fan in this moment. Like, the night vision camera's on. Dan's running around. It's like really shaky.
Yeah.
We see
Allie's like, what the fuck?
Allie's freaking
Martine,
out.
I think she dipped out. She should
she dipped.
She was like, I'm going to show you what to do. I'm
100%.
out of here, because she was the smartest diva in that movie.
Knew, yeah. And Toby's throwing everybody around, and he's like torturing Dan and Allie. And then Dan goes down to the basement where he hears Hunter crying from behind some shit. But then something like screeches at him from like behind the shit where he thinks Hunter was. And then Hunter's like just standing there behind him. And we see something whirl past the camera. I hate it. And he turns around. And Christy's face is there, jump scare. She's like, bleh. And then they have this big showdown. You can't really tell what's going on. But like he ends up placing the crucifix like right on her chest. And then shit's just like going crazy, and it's like kind of an earthquake. Like, are there like beads or something on the ground? Like, what were those
like,
on the ground?
I don't know. Like
rice or pebbles
like
or
I have
beads?
no fucking clue.
But they're like shaking like there's an earthquake, and then everything goes silent. And then like because Hunter just like strolls in casually, like hey, like into frame.
His like little feet.
Yeah,
I didn't think that was cute.
And then all the lights come back on. And we see that Dan has returned Christy to bed, and she's resting now. And we see him in the kitchen, and he burns a picture of Katie. And it's the picture of Katie when she was a little girl that they found in the attic.
Film, which is
first movie.
Such a good connection.
It's so cool because, well, in the first movie, Katie was all like, well, that house that we used to live in burned down, so I don't even know how this photo exists. So you're like, oh, that's why we have this spooky photo that's all burnt and singed.
Yeah.
But now you're like, oh, that's not why. It was burned and showed up there because it was a part of this ritual that Dan did to expel the demon onto Katie.
Yeah.
It's such a good connection. And again, it's adding more to the lore from the first movie. So then we get 3 weeks later, okay? And Katie is visiting, and everything's fine. Christy's like, oh, everything's fine. And Katie's like, have you been experiencing anything, like, weird? And you can tell, at this point, Katie's been starting to be haunted.
Yep.
And Christy's like, no, we're good. Everything's fine.
She's like, it's been great. Everything's been great.
She didn't give a fuck. And Katie's like, yeah, I've been having weird shit happening. And I even told Mika. And I don't know, he's going to try and do something about it. But I don't even know if that was the right decision. And then it's the perfect setup for the first shot from Paranormal Activity 1.
What's kind of fun is you can literally like stop this movie.
Yeah.
Then watch all the
Watch
Paranormal
that
Activity 1. And then continue this movie.
It's like a prequel sequel.
It's a prequel and a sequel.
And we get to see, guess what? Their ugly house again. Woo! I was like, oh my god, the brown. Oh my god, the leopard print rug. Oh. The brown spindles. Oh. That half wall. Oh. And we see the whole first sequence from Paranormal Activity 1. And then we get a title card saying, Mika was killed. Which we been knew.
Yeah.
Duh. We then see the security camera cycle through at Dan and Christy's house again. And Dan is napping on the couch. And he sits up, cuts away to another angle. And when it cuts back, Katie's there, and she's snapping his neck.
Oh, she's
bitch.
covered in blood, too.
Yeah, she looks just like she did at the end of Paranormal Activity 1 after she killed Mika.
Yeah.
And we see Christy's up with the baby, and Katie just barges in.
And she's like, Katie? And she super saiyans that bitch into the fucking, like, corner of the room where the camera is.
Right into the camera.
And we just hear that, like, Hunter's crying, but okay. And Katie just picks up Hunter.
Picks him up.
Walks away.
Walks out.
And it says Allie came home.
From school. She found both her parents' bodies. And Katie and Hunter's whereabouts remain unknown.
And where is Abby? Where was Abby?
Yeah, where's the dog?
But I'm also like, Abby's okay.
Yeah.
Because I looked up doesthedogdie.com. According to them, Abby does not die.
Yeah, I think she's fine.
She was probably just outside chilling. She was like, bark.
Yeah. Bark.
Bark, 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 bark.
But yes.
That was
But
Paranormal
that's the
Activity
end.
2.
Paranormal Activity 2. Such a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah.
Couldn't
absolutely.
recommend it more.
Not at all.
And yeah, at some point down the line, we'll definitely do the third one. And we'll definitely do marked ones. Because that one's really fun too. I don't know how I feel about any other Paranormal Activities. Maybe we'll revisit them and I'll give them like, you know, I'll look at them with fresh eyes. Because it's been a long time since I've seen them. Okay, Stevie, so we're coming down to the end of our spooky season series as we are nearing the end of October. It's been fun.
It has.
We've seen a ghost.
A ghost.
We saw Toby. We've seen a witch.
A witch.
We saw a Blair Witch.
We saw Frankenstein's monster.
Mm-hmm. What else did we see? We saw Ginger the werewolf.
We saw some werewolves.
But for our final week of October, there's a very special Halloween character that we have to talk about.
Yes.
We're gonna do, and I'm so excited because it's one of my faves, the OG Halloween. Bitch! Finally!
The amount. Okay, first of all, the amount of people that we know, like personally, who have been like, "Oh my god, when
When are you gonna do Halloween?
Bitch, when the fuck do you think you're gonna do Halloween?
It's in the name.
It's, you know what? Ask that question again. Think really hard.
Really hard.
When we want to do that one.
It's
So we're
true,
finally
though.
doing it.
Yes. I'm so excited. It's
And then,
classic.
I'm excited for what we have planned for November.
I know. Can't say it yet. But it's gonna be fun.
Amazing.
So we have all that to look forward to on Let's Scream. And thank you so much for joining us this week. We hope you had fun with us at Dan and Christy's house, learning even more about Toby. Please remember to give us a like and a follow. Leave a glowing review of the pod. That really helps us out. If you want to comment on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we are at Let's Scream Pod on all of the socials. You can also send us requests for future episodes as far as what movies you want us to see. We love hearing your suggestions.
Yes.
You can follow me at Parker_Will_C on Instagram.
And you can follow me at StevieNash95 on Instagram.
And until next time, this has been
Let's Scream. Bye.